Welcome to the Flip Your Script podcast. I'm Kristi Piehl. This is a Flip Your Script podcast first. We are having a return guest. This speaks to how much I respect this woman and her work. Janice Kaplan has published 15 books, including the New York Times bestseller, The Gratitude Diaries, and she's flipping her script again. Her brand new book is, and I have it right here, What Your Body Knows About Happiness. It explores the mind-body connections that could hold the keys to happiness. And who doesn't want to be more happy? Welcome to the podcast again, Janice.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here and to see you again. Thanks.
Well, we're going to start in another kind of unusual way. I have in my company a gratitude groupie of yours. And we're going to flip the script on you. And I invited him, Chris Woodard, to join because you talk so much about gratitude and the gift of other people and how what people say and how it makes you feel. And so before we talk about the new book, I wanted someone who has been deeply impacted by your work to be able to express gratitude to you, if that's okay.
Oh, how lovely. Thank you.
Hi, Janice. It's a pleasure to meet you virtually here today.
You too.
Yeah, like Kristi said, I read the Gratitude Diaries in 2018 on Kristi's recommendation, actually, after a brief conversation we had while talking about another book. And I'm, no pun intended, so grateful that you spent the time doing the research on it, putting the work into it. Reading that book was honestly the start of a real life change for me and a total mindset flip in how I look at things. And it has been incredibly impactful to the point that I tease our colleagues here at Media Minefield now that gratitude is my favorite soapbox. And I was able to give a presentation to everyone within the last 2 weeks talking about gratitude and its importance and how everybody can be a little more grateful, stealing lots of your material. So thank you for all you've done and know how much it's impacted me and changed my life for the better.
Oh, that means so much. Thank you. And please steal all the material you want because spreading gratitude and getting that message across means so much, and that it had an impact on you really just, it's exactly why you write a book. And it's exactly why you try to say things, is to help other people discover what matters. And thank you. I appreciate that.
Mission accomplished.
What I love about the gratitude concept also, Janice, that Chris, I think, spoke to really well, is that it's one of those things that when you change your mind, it doesn't impact work, it doesn't impact home, it doesn't impact friendships, it impacts all. And people notice that you have this sort of different vibe, for lack of a better word, about you, and it changes everything. And that's one of the things that Chris talked about. And I think, Chris, your wife would say, if she were on the call, hey, Janice, thank you for making my husband and the father of my children a better guy.
Yeah, it is really amazing. You know, when I started writing the Gratitude Diaries, Chris, I almost thought of it as a literary device. Like, oh, won't it be fun? I'll spend a year living more gratefully and see what happens and write a book about it. But as you discovered, it really is life-changing. And it starts to hit you on a very, very deep level. And you start to realize in any situation that you don't have to be trapped by the situation, that you actually can control it, that you can't change what's happening, but you can change how you look at it, as we say. And that gives you a power and a strength that's really quite incredible, that you don't feel as at the whim of what's happening, but rather, I can make this good, whatever it is.
Well, thank you, Chris, for joining. Thank you, Janice, for allowing us to have a gratitude groupie. Thank you personally, because many people read the book and they put on, social, oh, that was so great, or whatever. But I have expressed my gratitude to you the last time I had you on, but since it has really infiltrated through the whole company and Chris's life and his children, I thought this would be a great opportunity. So thanks for joining us for a minute, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
We talked about the Gratitude Diaries, which is so powerful. And then with your new book, which is out, new in January, What Your Body Knows About Happiness, and which I've been reading, it takes it one step further. And what if it isn't just our mind makes decision? What if our bodies are also part of this equation? What prompted you to do this work?
Well, it was that flip that you describe. And it actually happened to me one day when I was on a vacation. And it was one of those days when you're traveling and nothing goes right. You know, the flights are bad and everything is wrong. And I was standing at an airport and I was getting really frustrated. And I thought, okay, wait a minute. I'm the gratitude lady. I'm not allowed to get frustrated. So I did all the little gratitude tricks that I have. You know, my luggage is lost, but I have a bathing suit in my carry-on. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I'm going on vacation. And, you know, my husband and I started to laugh and I did certainly feel better. But then cut to a little while later, we were actually going to an island. And so we were on a boat. And all of a sudden, the sun is shining, the water is sparkling underneath, and the wind is in my hair. And all of a sudden, I just felt really happy and really great. And I didn't have to do any of those gratitude exercises or tell myself to be happy. I actually just felt happy. And I thought, wait a minute, what just happened? What just changed? And I realized something in my environment had played something on my body that had changed my mindset. And that led me to start thinking about body-mind connections in a different way. I touch on them a little bit in the Gratitude Diaries, but hadn't really thought about them before. And this book was so exciting for me to start to explore in all sorts of different directions the power of our bodies to control our minds, rather than what we normally think of, which is vice versa.
And when you started doing that work, were you surprised by what you found? Because I have to be honest, reading the research, it's shocking. It's like, why doesn't everyone know this? Why aren't we taught this? Because some of it is similar to some things that, you know, kind of like cognitively and like, oh, that makes sense. But then some things are like, what? Yeah. I had no idea. Exactly. How is this possible?
Exactly, because we think of our brain as the big computer that's controlling everything. But what you have to realize is that your brain is this 3-pound mass that's kind of stuck inside this dark skull, and it's not doing anything except what it needs input. It needs input from your body. And what was fascinating for me, one of the first things that really intrigued me, was the discovery that instead of our minds telling our bodies what to do, it's often in reverse. Now, let me give you an example. There's an old example of if you're walking along and a bear is suddenly in front of you. Or if you're in a city, I guess it's if you're suddenly at a dark alley and your heart starts pounding and your hands are sweaty and you get scared. Okay, so the question is your heart pounding because you're scared? Or are you scared because your heart is pounding? Well, we would normally think, of course, I'm scared, and then that makes my heart pound and my hands get sweaty. But it's starting to appear that it is actually the opposite, that our bodies respond instantaneously before our minds do. And our minds are constantly scanning our bodies to figure out what's going on. So you see that bear or that dark alley, your heart starts pounding, your brain is constantly scanning your body, and your brain's going, ooh, heart pounding, sweaty palms must be a problem here. I think I better get involved. Now, obviously, this is happening in milliseconds, but it's fascinating to realize that it's the body responding first. People have a really hard time accepting that that could be true, but think of it in something that we know, right? If you touch a hot stove, your hand is going to pull back much before you can think, oh my goodness, hot stove, better remove my hand. And if we didn't rely on our bodies to respond first, we wouldn't live very well. You know, we can't tell our bodies to breathe. We can't tell ourselves to blink. So once you start realizing the power of your body and the fact that it's constantly sending this information to your mind, you can start to think about it in terms of, okay, well then how can I use my body so that it's sending positive instincts and positive ideas to my mind also?
So for example, there's a lot of research that was surprising, and it makes so much sense. So right now I'm holding a cup of coffee and it's warm. So according to the research, I'm going to have a more positive perception, conversation, view of you than if I was holding an iced coffee. Correct?
Absolutely. It was fascinating research by a professor named John Barge out of Yale who did that, where he had people either hold a warm cup of coffee or an iced coffee. And they didn't know that this was part of the experiment. And then he had them evaluate people in terms of how kind and warm they were. And sure enough, as you just said, Kristi, the people who were holding the warm coffee identified people as being warmer and kinder than the people who held the cold coffee. Now, if asked, did that coffee have any influence on how you evaluated the person? They would say, absolutely not, because those are things that we're not aware of. But our bodies bodies and minds in a very strange way think in metaphors. So, warm coffee, I'm just starting to feel warmer. There's been lots of follow-up research on that. There was a professor who's now with the University of Michigan who did research where he found that if you're sitting on a hard chair, you negotiate harder than if you're sitting on a soft chair. Again, maybe soft chair, soft heart. The same researcher at Yale did something where he gave people resumes to evaluate. Now, that's a sort of standard psychological trick. And if I handed you a resume, Kristi, you might think, oh, I'm just going to make sure there's no unconscious bias here, and I'm not going to, pick somebody by their name or their location or what they look like. So you'd be aware of all that, but you might not be aware of the weight of the clipboard that the resume was on. And sure enough, the people who got resumes on heavy clipboards evaluated the people as being stronger and more likely to be successful than people who got them on light clipboards. Again, somehow our body is sending the message, that's a heavyweight, that's something heavy, that's something important, and our brain takes that message in. So our brains are really smart. They can do all sorts of smart things, but they can also take these surprising messages and kind of get a little cross-wiring with them.
So when it comes to how to use the information, because it's more than just fascinating, right? I mean, yes, it's interesting, and yes, wow, my body's amazing, which we should be grateful for every day. But we can use the information to help us make decisions, to have more awareness. How did you bridge that gap between, well, this is fascinating, and here's what people can do with it? Because ultimately, you have made, as we talked about with Chris, make an impact and change how people are thinking. How did you bridge that gap with the happiness concept in the new book?
Yeah, it's not something that had really been done before. And part of the fun for me is taking all of this different research from neurologists and psychologists and putting it together and trying to figure out exactly what you said. So there's research, for example, that if you sit straighter, if you stand or sit straighter, it's easier for you to access positive emotions. And the reason for it is that when you're depressed or down, you just sort of naturally slump. And so again, your body and brain start making that connection. So when your brain sees that you're slumped, it goes, oh, we must be in a bad mood here. If you sit up, you feel more positively about things. It's a very simple thing to do when you're feeling down. Just like in the Gratitude Diaries, we say if you're feeling unhappy about something, stop and reframe it. If you're feeling down about something, sit up a little bit, look up. Go outside. There's lots of research that being outside changes how you feel. There was fascinating research about the power of being near water. It doesn't have to be the ocean. Most, there's lakes and rivers in cities all over the country. Lots of cities in America have been reclaiming their waterfronts. If you're in a truly inland place, go and get one of those little electric waterfalls and put it that you can put for $30 in your living room. There's a great power to water. And a researcher out of the UK named Matthew White found that being near water for 2 hours a week significantly improves people's well-being. And it doesn't have to be 2 hours at once. You can do it, a half an hour walk a few times a week. And so just being aware of those things that you can do to change your mood when you just feel like there's nothing I can do. And you say, my mind isn't letting me do this right now. Okay, I'm going to let my body do it and send the messages to my mind.
And to think too about the agency that we have about where we sit and what we sit on and the temperature in the room and some of those types of things, because I noticed, so I'm at the office right now and there's a boiler out. So it's cold, and everyone came back from the weekend yesterday, and it was cold, and people were more complainy. There were people, sort of stopping around complaining, and not just about cold. I heard other things, and I went home and said to my husband, my goodness, there was something going around in the office, yesterday or the day. And it all kind of clicked with the book that because it was colder, research has shown that does change a mood. Just like, if you're in a really warm spot and you think, ooh, I would like a nap. Well, you might not like a nap if it was a little bit colder. So it is really fascinating, and it does make sense once you start to kind of put the two pieces together. So if you are the gratitude lady, which you said earlier, and now you're the happiness lady, how much pressure do you feel, Janice, to be grateful and happy and skipping around, singing all the time?
Well, no one can do that, of course, but it does help to know the things that you can do. And I love that story you just told, because being aware of how your environment is affecting you and being aware of the misattribution that our minds can do. So as you said, the people weren't just complaining about the cold, they were complaining about lots of things without being aware of what was really affecting them. And I'll tell you a funny story about that, which is that I think I tell the story in the book, that I got an iPhone at one point, and I got a new iPhone, and I brought it home. And I just didn't like it. And I wasn't sure what was wrong, but it just didn't seem to be working right. I didn't like the way anything in it worked, and I was missing my own iPhone. I went back to the store, and fortunately I had a smart enough person at the Genius Bar who said, I think it's the case that you got. And I said, what do you mean the case? He said, well, you got this very hard plastic case with hard edges, and I'm finding that people who get that case aren't happy. So here, try this case instead. And it was a soft silicone case. And I said, all right, I'll try it. And I came home, and sure enough, all of a sudden my phone seemed to be working much better. And I liked my phone. And it took me a while to realize that it really was just the feel in my hand changed how my brain was perceiving it. Now, you would think that my brain would be smart enough to recognize the technology of the iPhone and to appreciate the technology and the fact that the technology had not changed just because I changed the case. But I was getting that message to my brain of, I don't like this, when I was holding the hard case. And I was getting the message to my brain of, oh, this is really lovely, when I was holding the softer case. So those little things that we can change, that we need to be aware of, can really have a big difference.
So in order of gratitude practices, happiness mindset practices, where do you suggest people start?
Well, I think it's a combination. I think that, certainly I'm not giving up on the Gratitude Diaries. I think it was a really important book. And as you were so kind to introduce me to Chris earlier, it means so much to me that it has had an impact on people. And as I said, I do think that gratitude and being able to know that you can reframe a situation gives you a real power and a real sense of control, which is what we are so often missing in our lives and is so often making us unhappy. But I think also understanding the power of our environments to change how we feel is very strong, because there are times when you're down and you feel like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to stop and feel positive about something. And I just can't make myself do it right now. And then if you can do something physical, if you can put out that soft pillow, if you can buy yourself some flowers, there's lots of research that flowers make people happier. It may be something that was hardwired from back when we were out, picking in the fields and scourging for food, and seeing flowers was a sign that berries and fruit were close behind. Whatever it is, there's great research showing that flowers do make you happier. So it doesn't have to be something fancy. Just go out and get a pretty bunch at your local grocery store. I think something else you can do for yourself to make yourself happier is to have new experiences. Because one of the things that happens is that we get caught in doing the same things over and over again. And our brains, as I said before, are these great instruments, but they also kind of would prefer to be lazy, and they would prefer to be able to sit back a little bit and not have to pay too much attention. So if everything looks just the same, that brain, which is constantly scanning to see if everything is okay, is going, yep, everything's okay. I don't have to pay too much attention here. But as soon as you're out doing something new, and it doesn't have to be an exotic vacation, go to a different part of town than you usually go to, or go to a farmer's market and buy a fruit that you haven't bought before and taste that. Just any little thing that you can do like that stimulates your brain to pay attention and stimulates you to wake up a little bit. And that's a very positive feeling, because when you're feeling more alert, you're feeling more positive. So it's a fun thing to do. There's no negative to it. And it can change your mindset and attitude also.
Even, driving home from work a different way, or going to a different grocery store, these little things that, make our brain pay more attention. It's also, I think, the reason it's sad. And now I will get into mom mode. Get off your phone, kids, right? Because you go into an amazing place, whether it's an exotic location or it's an airport or the mall or whatever, or there's a beautiful sunset and everybody is looking down on their phones. And I think they're missing some of the things that can happen with that mind-body connection that can help change and reframe us. And I think that your book is coming at such a great time, because many people, mental health, all of the research is out there, and it's not just children, it's across all of the ages, and that we are just a less happy bunch collectively. And part of it is because we aren't doing some of the things, these simple things that you just mentioned.
That's so interesting. And I have to admit, I hadn't really thought of it that way before, but I really like that, because we think that when we're looking at our phones, we're getting stimulated and that we're, seeing all these interesting things, but we're not. We're pretty much seeing the same things that we always see, and our brains are not paying that much attention. It's all just kind of floating over us. And you're absolutely right. If you look up and look at the sunset or catch the rainbow, there's something very powerful. One researcher found that there's a great power in ephemeral events, like that sunset that you mentioned, or seeing a rainbow, or watching a fireplace even. Just something that is not going to stay the same somehow captures our brains. If there were always a rainbow in the sky, you wouldn't really pay that much attention to it. But when you see one, you want to capture it and you're excited by it. So that's a really great point, that to be able to look up, to see those things that are fleeting, that you're not going to catch or capture again, is just so important. And on that subject of kids, it reminds me of something else, which is that movement is really, really important for both adults and children. And one of the things that is a danger, particularly for younger kids in school, is that we still are always telling children to be quiet and sit down. And we like the children, schools are busy and teachers are busy, and there are a lot of kids sitting at a lot of desks, and they like the kids who are sitting down quietly. And for many children, in fact, probably for most children, it's the worst way to learn. That being able to engage their bodies, to move around, to use their bodies to learn and discover things is the best way to learn. And I think the more and more that we can encourage our kids to do that, to be physical as they're learning, to not mind if kids like to stand up at their desk, or read standing, or play with an abacus in order to learn math. It's really a great way for kids to learn, and for adults also. The more you move, the more creative you're going to be. Our brains do not do their best when they're sitting hunched over a laptop. So if you're stuck on a problem, get up, walk around, do a couple of jumping jacks, whatever it is that gets you moving, and you'll find that you really unleash your creativity a lot more.
Something that I have started doing that I've found is very helpful, because it's so easy to get in the habit of grab the phone, do the thing that makes you miss what's going on around, but to do the five senses, right? So stop where you are, and then, okay, what do I hear? What do I smell? What do I see? What do I feel? And that also connects this, the mind body. And if it's what do I feel, what is the temperature? What does the wall feel like? What is my hot coffee feel like? It is doing some of these things, but it's also making us aware, which I think leads to some unhappiness if we're always doing and doing and doing. And I'm like, do as I say, not as I do, because I know I'm terrible at this. And I even got a tattoo to remind myself to be more present because I'm 10 steps ahead. And I know that isn't good for my brain. And your book really affirms like the gratitude practices, but the happiness about all the things around you and how it does impact you. And we think we have so much control, right? I'm smart. My brain is working. I can control. But turns out your environment has a lot of control too.
Right. There were even some, I would say almost funny research that I came across about food and eating and how the plate that you eat off of changes how you think about the food. I think it was that when you have a dessert on a white plate, you think it tastes sweeter than if it's on a black plate. If you're eating cheese on an angular plate, you think that it tastes sharper than if it's not on an angular plate. There's a researcher out of the UK, again, named Charles Spence, who did some fascinating research on what he calls cross modalities, where he did whiskey tastings, and he got people to describe the whiskey, and they knew it was the same whiskey that they were holding. They were going from room to room, but the rooms were set up differently. And by the changing in the atmosphere in the room, the lighting, the music, he was able to get them to describe the whiskeys completely differently. And, we think, as you just said, that we're so in control, we're so aware of everything that we're doing. And it kind of makes you laugh when you realize how much is feeding into things like how we taste and what we perceive. And I think you can have some fun with that with yourself. And it also helps you not take everything so seriously and so dramatically, and to say, I'm burning the dinner tonight, but guess what? I'll put it on pretty plates and I'll play nice music and no one's going to notice.
Sniff the flowers, look at the flowers on your way over to the table. And it does remind everyone, I think, and both of your books and your research and the things that you've kind of connected together, awareness and we have agency, and be aware and to ask ourselves, like, what do I need? What actually would make me happy right now? Would a candle burning, would that help my mood? But I think even, making your bed, and there's, the famous make your bed, right? And if you make your bed, you have control, and you come home and you're like, look, I did something good today. And all of this is connected together, and it's really important. So thank you, Janice, for being the only guest we've had on twice, and for continuing to do interesting things and to motivate. And again, my whole company is different because of the Gratitude Diaries. So thank you.
Oh, it's so moved and honored to hear that. Thank you, Kristi. You do wonderful work. Your company does great work, and I am very honored to be your return guest. Thank you.
Yes. Now let's wrap it up like we did last time, but with a different quote. As you have thought about flipping your script and the ways that you encourage people to change their mindset, change their environment, what's a quote that you would leave us with, Janice?
Well, I'll leave you with sort of a funny quote from Oscar Wilde on this topic, who said, "Those who see no difference between soul and body have neither." So you need a soul, you need a body, and you need to be able to put them together to move forward.
Thank you, Janice. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Kristi.
Well, this week's Flip Your Script Challenge is a pretty easy one. We've talked about it quite a few times today. Be aware. What is it that you need? Think about your environment. Put the phone down, whether it's gratitude, whether it's thinking about how you can be more happy and what the role your body has in that. Take a practice. Gratitude. Write down 5 things that make you that you're grateful for on the gratitude side. On the happiness side, think about that body-mind connection, and be aware. Be aware. Be present. My hope is Janice's story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.